Thank you.
Obrigado.
Muito bem, obrigado. So, thank you, danke, gracias, muito obrigado. Thank you for inviting me to have this session about AD. This morning we had the cool stuff about Azure AD. Let's say that many may consider AD as the boring stuff, the old stuff, the stuff that nobody cares about anymore. But still, today it's very important. A little bit about me. My name is Jorge Almeida Pinto. I'm working for Semperis. I've got 3 roles: working as a solution architect, as a product manager for our backup recovery solution, and I'm also an incident response team member. Working a lot with identity, security, and recovery in general. Let's say that I'm really happy to be here, not just because I was invited, but because since this weekend I was involved with some other colleagues in a real ransomware attack for a customer, and we were recovering that customer from basically almost nothing to a live AD again. This presentation contains a little bit of guidance regarding disaster recovery planning. These are just some highlights, because when you talk about disaster recovery, I think I can fill up a whole day about the topic, because it goes so much further than discussed here. The interesting part, of course, of the whole presentation is the real live incident recovery scenario, bullet 4, that was experienced a few months ago. That was also for a customer we helped recover from a ransomware. From an attack. So, a demo. I'm going to start immediately with a demo, because I want to send out a specific message, and it's not about our products, because it won't be a product demo, I promise. That's not the intention. What I want to do is, I want to show you that if you are prepared in a certain manner, having the VMs or the infrastructure to deploy new VMs, having a correct backup recovery solution in place, I now start the disaster recovery of the environment. I've got 5 machines, as you can see here, 5 of them. It's a forced root and a child domain. In total, 5 domain controllers, 4 writables, and 1 read-only domain controller. And my hope is that after the session, the forced recovery is done. By the way, this is not the environment that is going to be recovered, because this was my environment at home, and I was having connectivity issues to get there, so the other one was my plan B. Always have a plan B. Securing and protecting Active Directory. As a company, we help customers secure their Active Directory by performing scans using multiple tools. And with that, we want to indicate to customers, hey, this is what's wrong in terms of configurations, security, historical bad settings, etc., to prevent the attack as much as possible. But we also see things after the attack. After attacking, after the Active Directory being attacked, we of course try to recover if there's anything to recover, because you need to have backups. And then we perform all kinds of scans to see whatever is bad. And then we find many things. Admin accounts with password never expires, admin accounts with SPNs, admin accounts with password not required, unpatched machines, very old machines. I can go on the whole day for the stuff that we find. Historical settings, because people do things throughout the years. They continue to do things throughout the years to come, and they forget the other stuff. As time goes on, you need to do something about it. And how do you do that? Is to proactively search, but also fix. Search for so-called indicators of exposure. And those are all kinds of security settings within accounts, but also in general as a configuration thingy in AD. Things might be configured in a way that it is not desired. It might be a good idea years ago, but today it might be a bad idea, and you need to do something about it. And the only way to do something about it is to scan for it. And then you get a so-called to-do list. I need to clean up accounts from this setting, and I need to configure AD from this setting. But there's another one that is not visible in AD. It is there, but the attack paths are not visible to you. So the so-called invisible attack paths also need to be investigated to see, hey, is there some nobody account somewhere from which you can hop on from this to that, you misuse this, and suddenly you are the main admin. Those paths do exist. And if you have never scanned for them, you may not even be sure those paths are gone or don't even exist. So make sure you scan for those. You also need to have a look at so-called indicators of compromise. For example, if somebody used DC Shadow, there are certain characteristics within AD that will tell you DC Shadow is used. When a change is done in AD, most of the times you can see who did it, where, etc., etc. But when you use DC Shadow, you will find all the stuff, but you will not find who did it, because it's a machine account, let's call it under the hood. Kerberos roasting, the perfect mechanism of attackers to do, because it's really easy. Why? Think about accounts with very old passwords, very weak passwords, with SPNs, lower encryption algorithms. So it becomes very easy to do stuff, take it offline, decrypt, and then get the passwords, and of course much more. How can you do that? Oh, and of course, you need to think and look at your AD as an attacker. Look at it as an attacker. Of course, don't attack it. Would be really stupid, but okay. But look at it as an attacker, and then try to solve things in that same manner. I've got some reading material for you, but also some video regarding defenders think in lists and attackers think in graphs. And that's the whole invisible path thing you need to have a look at. Well, how can you do that? Well, some time ago, for a customer, because I was working at that customer, I wrote a PowerShell script. A PowerShell script that would scan all the accounts in Active Directory and get basically everything that was related to security presented in an Excel sheet. But I went even further by using specific PowerShell modules that are out there and scanned for compromised passwords. I used a combination of the DS internals PowerShell module combined with have I been pawned compromised password list. And we scanned everything. And then you will be surprised how big the list is of passwords that are compromised, but also how big the list is of passwords that are being reused. Think about some application administrator having his own account, having an admin account, and 100 accounts for applications. Give it a number. So he has 102 accounts. And you will be surprised, maybe, that all those 102 accounts have the exact same weak password. Compromise one, go to the other one, because probably somewhere it's written down, he is the owner. And then you can hop from one account to the other one, because one account might be more powerful than the other one. Another way is to use one of our tools, so-called, which is Purple Knight, which will scan the AD, also at an account basis, but it will also look at configurations items within AD itself, and then present you with a very nice score. This, by the way, scans at force level. Another tool is Ping Castle, which does the same thing, different manners, also gives you a nice scoring mechanism, and it does it at domain level. And this is a scan from my own domain. Well, if you look at it, it is fully in the red, so it's as bad as it can be. I hope your environment is not like this. And then there's another one, that's Bloodhound. That's the tool that is really nice to use, and have a look at your AD. Where are those invisible attack paths? So you have a tool, the ingester, SharpHound, that gets the data from the force level. You import it into Bloodhound, and then you can perform all kinds of analysis using predefined queries to see how do I get from a nothing to the crown jewels. This is my test environment. And when I ran this quite some time ago already, I was surprised that some stupid SharePoint admin that I had configured somewhere, somehow, was able to get to the main admin in 2 ways. I didn't even know. I just did it, and this is what I mean. You might have stuff like this in your environment you're not aware of. So make sure to scan for it and especially do something about it. I know from experience, all these scans, all this stuff, it will lead to huge discussions. Stop the discussions. Start somewhere. Just start doing it, because that's the whole point of it, because the whole discussion is just delaying the whole work. And of course, there are more tools out there that can help you. Why should you have a disaster recovery plan? AD, believe it or not, although everybody's focused on Azure AD, which is the cool new stuff all around the world, AD is still the identity system on-prem used by many, many companies. Compromise AD most likely everything else connected to it goes down the drain. Of course, you can't attack Azure AD in a terms that you can bring it down from AD. No, you make it unavailable for that specific customer. So if your AD is down, depending, of course, on your authentication scenario, how do you authenticate to Azure? And, of course, all your other services. That's what I mean with the unavailability, because Azure AD itself is there. So, although legacy, it's still very, very important for many. Business reasoning, business continuity. For example, in the Netherlands, banks, for example, are obligated to have a disaster recovery plan in their business continuity plan, because they must be able to recover, especially if we are talking about, that's the word in Dutch, system banks. Those are, we have a few in the Netherlands. Those are system banks that are very important to the whole country and the economy. If one of those banks goes down, for example, in the economical crisis, the government jumped in and saved the bank because it's too important to let it down. But if it's a ransomware attack, the damage is severe. So those businesses must have disaster recovery due to all kinds of regulations. The complexity. Well, this applies to everyone. Some may think, recovering Active Directory, just restore a domain control, just restore multiple domain controllers, and you're done. Well, it's not really like that. It's really complex. And I know, because I've done it multiple times, manually, scripted, but also with a tool. And even with a tool, you gain lots of time, because many of the tasks are automated, but still it's a lot of work and thinking, and you always need to be with multiple people because it's really complex and many hours, I know. When you think about the complexity, it's not about the technology only, but also look at your company. Is it, for example, just a single data center? Is it a distributed company? Is it, does it have multiple stakeholders throughout the world? How about decision making? When do you make the decision, we are going to recover? Okay, if you have been ransomware, well, the decision is very easy. But I've also the experience where a company has been attacked and where the AD, this is, by the way, the scenario that I'm going to explain, is still up and running, surprisingly. When do you make the decision, we are going back? And I'm going to help you by giving you an idea. Risk management. Risk management. You need to think about scenarios. Which scenarios? Well, let's have a look at these scenarios. Years and years ago, many of us were talking about what's the probability and the impact of the scenario. And we were focused on the lower part. Schema changes that went bad. Never seen one. And if the schema changes goes bad, you can even defunct it. So there are many things that we were planning for, they never occurred. But today, ransomware, number one, it's as common as having coffee because it happens every single day. Hackers try to attack you on your weakest moment. Every single time I was called and my colleagues were called, were always on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Always. Those guys do not work from 8 to 5. It's always, or in holidays. So when you are at your weakest moment, that's when they will grab you. Because nobody's there, people are on vacations, whatever. Everybody knows it. So ransomware, that's the number one reason today. Active Directory plan options. There are multiple. And just to summarize them, I'm talking about we have the default disaster recovery plan from Microsoft. For all of you that have read it, it's on the internet, it's a lot of text, and if you try to say, well, that's my plan, by just getting the Microsoft logo out of it and then putting your logo on it, well, please think again, don't do it. I've seen it happen where people say, well, this is my disaster recovery plan, and probably that's just for some regulations checkbox. Yeah, I had a plan. But can you even execute it? Because if you try to execute just by what's in there, it will take you ages before you even get to a certain state. And then you have to also to look at, is it correctly described? Does it take everything into account? I can tell you for sure it does not. It's just a guidance for you to create your own plan. Another way to have a look at it is to, okay, let's take that plan and then customize it and script it. Every single task that you need to do for AD or the domain controllers or whatever, you can script it. I've done it. It's a lot of work. It requires lots of knowledge because you need to know what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And then there's the question about maintenance. If something changes in your environment, you need to see if it still works, because something might break in the end. Okay, we sell a tool. So our preferred way is the customized AD plan, but then fully automated. Everything that's about recovery is fully automated, as I just showed to you. Click a button, go do something else, come back when it's done. Then comparing again how it works, the two left options basically think in the way, okay, from every single domain, restore the initial domain controllers. Clean them up, do whatever you need to do, and then build from there by repromoting, by cloning, because I can imagine if you have a very big company that you have the initial domain controllers and then clone them as rabbits so that you can handle the authentication load. Think about the authentication load, because if you put the initial domain controllers in production, they will probably die because everybody's banging at them. Applications, users, whatever, everything. So you need to be prepared and to put something there that is ready to handle the load and then distribute accordingly. Of course, this depends on how big your environment is. As I mentioned before, regarding the skills, on the left two, you really need to have very deep skills or many skills to understand what needs to be done, the order, and also regarding the tools. If you have a tool, you don't need to have the skills regarding the whole thing because it's done by the tool. It doesn't mean by having a tool, and for those companies that have said or are thinking, oh, I have a tool, I'm covered. The tool will help you, but you're still not there. You still have lots of pre-tasks and post-tasks to do. Because this is about AD. Think about everything else connected to AD. Workstations, servers for which the secure channel will fail, because when you go back in time, objects don't exist anymore, or objects that were deleted are suddenly there again. And think about Azure, the connections. There will be a serious mismatch. Think about passwords. You go back in time, passwords will be a problem for computers, but also users. Complexity, again, well, you can see it on screen. With a tool, it is easier. Even if it's scripted, it's even easier than using the manual approach. So it's somewhere in the middle. And the recovery time objective, that's my whole goal with the demo. While I'm talking, the AD is going to be recovered. Think about it. Yes, it's just 5 domain controllers, I know, but it's crappy hardware. It's not your full-blown production hardware running out there. And it's just a few domain controllers. But it's about the idea. I'm talking and the thing is recovering, and in the end it will be working. Have you thought about the following? If you have a plan, code, tooling, whatever, where do you store it? Not on SharePoint. Also not on SharePoint Online. You need to have something that is not AD dependent. I've seen it happen, and think about the following scenario. At a customer, we had a let's call it location, where information was stored, IT information, and it was non-AD dependent. The disaster recovery plan was also there. I wrote it. It was there. And every single time I had to log on to that location, I had to provide my username and password, which was not from AD, it was from that system. And there was one day when I suddenly experienced, oh, this is weird. Why am I not being asked for credentials? Okay, whatever. Probably caching. Next day, next week, and I started to ask, did somebody enable SSO? And SSO was enabled, depending on AD. Watch out for that. Somebody or something or whatever might change. Suddenly you have SSO, having a dependency on AD, and the moment you need it, oh dear. Do you have a backdoor account that still allows you to go in? Credentials. When you go back in time, and now I'm going to exaggerate, let's say that you would go back in time for a month. Do you still have the domain admin password for a month ago? Do you know that? So one of the best practices is, as I was already mentioned during the introduction, I'm the one that wrote the curb TGT password reset script. The best practice recommendation is to use that script, or something else, whatever you want. It's not mandatory, of course, but at least reset the password of the curb TGT account for every single domain every 6 months. If you ask me, for the default domain admin account, you should do the same. Reset it maybe, but preferably change it. And every single time you change the password, make sure to write down somewhere, of course, in a secure location, password vault, for example, to record which were the older passwords. You don't need to keep passwords from 5 years, because you will never go back for 5 years, unless that's your last resort, but okay, you never know. But if you keep them, it's just a number. For 2 years, it's good enough, because it might happen, you created a backup, you changed the password, you need to recover, you go back a week to that moment, oh, your password is different. Oops, if you can't log in, you have an issue. Think about, for the same scenario, your directory services restore mode accounts. Those accounts that are basically per domain controller. There is a way, by the way, where you can create an account in AD, and you can have every single domain controller, for example, through a scheduled task, sync the password of that disabled account to its DSRM account. And it happens automatically. So instead of going throughout all the domain controllers and changing all those account passwords, just change it every 6 months on that AD account. And if you have that scheduled task enabled, something you need to do, it will sync it automatically. Again, keep the history. As I mentioned when I began, I said I was in a disaster recovery scenario for a customer. And that customer asked me the following question. We have AD, which is down. We have Azure AD Connect, which is down. We have services in Azure AD, which is working, and all kinds of other stuff. But we were using pass-through authentication. Is there any way to switch to native authentication in Azure? The answer simply is no. Why? Because with pass-through authentication, you told Azure, when I authenticate, please redirect me to my domain controllers. Oops, those are not available. Even if you would be able to make the switch to password hash sync, you still would not have the passwords in Azure, because they need to come from AD. So my recommendation is to you, if you are on pass-through authentication, please get rid of it. Use password hash sync, at least, because it's a blunt remark, I know, because security people will, no, I don't want to have the passwords in the cloud because it's a security issue, I know, yeah, and then you get all kinds of discussion, nothing happens. Been there. But then you have recovery. Sorry, we decided not to use password hash sync, and now we can't do anything, and the whole business is basically, I'm waiting. If you have password hash sync, you can start using the services immediately, as if nothing happened. If you have federated authentication, you can still use it, because it's a backup authentication mechanism. But still, on Azure, don't forget your break glass accounts, also in a password vault. No, you need to have Azure AD specific admin accounts. Don't sync your admin accounts to Azure. Bad thing to do, because if authentication doesn't work, game over. The only way that can get there is Microsoft. So the only thing that you would need to do with federated authentication is to go into Azure, use your break class account, switch the authentication mechanism for the specific domain to be moved from federated to native, and then everything goes as if it was normal. There's a catch. And that's something that I experienced, which I still don't fully understand how and why, but okay, it was there, and I would like to share with you is, as soon as I did that in my test environment, switching from federation to native, identity protection kicked in, which I had enabled in my tenant. It kicked in, and it forced me to change the password. It's not necessarily a bad idea, But then as soon as you start changing the passwords in Azure, you will have a mismatch with AD. Think about it. Is there a way to get out? Well, just thinking out loud, make sure that those people need to force the password change, and then when the sync is up again, use self-service password reset with password write back, and then the whole thing is synced again. When you're back. When you're back.
If your AD is compromised, better change passwords, right?
Sorry?
If your AD is compromised, better change passwords.
True, that is true. So the question is, if the AD is compromised, you need to change password. That is true. But I'm talking about, while the AD is down, you have switched the authentication mechanism. Let's say that you have identity protection enabled. In my case, it forced me to change the password. So all the passwords, let us assume that everybody logs on, would be changed in Azure. But then you have a match in AD. Mismatch in AD. How do you communicate to people? So by forcing them on-prem to change the password, or even from Azure, well, it's more complicated than I'm saying it is, but it's just an idea. Make sure it's done in Azure, and then sync back, so that there's a match again between the two. And Azure AD Connect will then do the other one. The authentication method, well, it's as I just explained. If you are on PTA, you need to do a recovery, you can't use your Azure services. Sorry. You need to wait until you're back again. That was the story I had to tell this customer. It wasn't a nice story, but at least it was the truth. This is the real life scenario. This is for real. This is an environment at a customer, simplified. On a Sunday, a colleague calls me, a colleague that I really like to work with. And I was like, well, he never calls on Sunday. Oh dear. And yes, my thoughts were, this is going to be a long week. And it was a long week. We started next month, the Monday after, and after talking to the customer, the whole environment was compromised. All kinds of bad things happening, but the AD was still running, surprisingly. And that surprised us, because most of the times, at least what we are seeing, is when they attack you, they try to encrypt everything and bring you to your knees so that you can pay ransom. These days, the golden scenario is double extortion. They try to steal data, and then they encrypt everything, because if you have encrypted everything and you still have backups, you can still go back. But because they have their data, they can put some pressure on it so that they still get money. And then it's up to you, okay, how worth is that data to me if it becomes public? I don't know. So even if you're able to recover, you might still think, oh, let's just pay the money. But still, there is no guarantee. It's a hacker. The environment was compromised, but up and running, surprisingly. The first thing we did, we used our solution. We created a backup, because we weren't entirely sure the backups of the customer would work, or if there was any dependency with AD. We just didn't know. That's also one of the things that we encounter is, I know from a human perspective, everybody's trying to do their best. But if people don't have the knowledge on how to do things, think about education, they will still try their best to achieve a certain goal. But in the end, it might still be not the good way to do something. It happens. While the AD was still up and running, we made a quick decision. Let's back up this thing immediately. Let's perform a forest recovery immediately in an isolated network of the forest. Just a few DCs. Because we did not know if this guy would go down. It was still up and running. We were just wanted to be prepared. If it goes down, we are already halfway with the recovery. So alongside, we started the forest recovery in an isolated network. Think about it. When you restore a backup, don't put your machines back into production. Make sure you go to the latest operating system, fully patched, and then make sure to scan your AD, the one that you have restored, before putting it back to production, using, for example, Purple Knight, Bloodhound, Pink Castle, or whatever tool you have out there. Make sure you scan it and fix everything that is critical to you before you release it to production. If you just restore it and put it back, start your stopwatch. It won't take long. The funny thing is that I've never seen it before. We all know the last logon and the last logon timestamps. Last logon is very accurate, but it's a per domain controller attribute. It doesn't replicate. Last logon timestamp has a 14-day lag, but it replicates. So it's, well, not the best of both worlds. But there's a third one. And the third one, I know it exists in AD, but I've never, ever seen it in an environment. This customer had a special feature in AD enabled where every single authentication, whether successful or failed, was written onto the account. So we could see how many failed attempts, how many successful attempts, even the last logon time, and it replicated, very accurate. It would write the information on the account itself, lots of it. I'm not saying this and then telling you it's a recommended thing. No, it's what we saw. So we have two products. One that catches the changes in AD, and it was running against this one. And then we also implemented it against this one. And what we were seeing was password spray attacks going on. Why we were able to see it? Because those are changes on the objects, many of them. So this was a waterfall of password spray attacks. The information was coming in because we were catching all those changes. So we restored it. And this is about the whole backup, just the whole change. Many solutions approach the whole backup, but let's back up the whole operating system. In a ransomware attack, what is a possibility that the operating system might contain? Malware, viruses, all kinds of other crap, scripts from the attacker to disable stuff, scheduled tasks. You have no idea. We, and maybe many other solutions, we only care what's about AD. We care about the database, and we care about the sysfall. We don't care about the operating system. So when we do a backup, we only back up the AD database and the sysfall. Everything else, I don't care. The restore, same story. Some of you might think, yeah, but the sysfall can still contain bad stuff. Very true, because it's a file-based thing. We have a feature, an option, where you can say, let's quarantine this. Everything that looks like an executable, batch, script, in file, whatever, is going to be quarantined. Meaning, as soon as the thing comes up again, it will not work, because it has been quarantined until you have reviewed every single file, an executable or script or whatever, and say, yeah, this is cool. And then you can unquarantine it, and you're good to go. But then again, I've also seen it at a customer where the sysfall was being misused for all kinds of stuff. It was basically a file server. And it may contain all kinds of stuff. And if it contains so much data, on this moment, when you have to go in and check every single file to see if it's okay, and in this case we were talking about 50,000 files, out of which were, I think, 2,500 executables, it will take some time. So thinking, oh, I'll have some AV scanner go through it. That's not good enough. Because have you checked the scripts? It might be just some script out there that is disabling your security, disabling services or enabling something else, or it's not doing anything harmful, but it's disabling your security. It's weakening you. So you need to have a look at those. That means you need to have a look at every single script. That's what they are doing now for the customer that we are going through. 50,000 files with, I think, 2,500 executables. It's painful. But again, if it's the same thing in your company, make sure that the sysfall only contains the stuff that should be there. Every other thing, sorry, not my problem. Put it somewhere else. We performed the vulnerability analysis using the tools I mentioned before. And then we had to make a decision. What do we do? We tried to make a decision. After scanning the tools using Purple Knight, we used Certify and also Bloodhound to get as much as information as possible, create a report for ourselves, but also for the customers, because customers just ask questions, what are you doing, and why, and when, because they want to be back as soon as possible. And with this information, we had to make a decision and think, okay, are we going to use this one or the recover one? And then at some point in time, after going through all the stuff, we found out, again, this is real stuff, that all the domain computers were able to change certificate templates. Not enroll, no, actually change them. So if you're able to change a certificate template, a domain computer, well, if you are an admin on a domain computer, you can become owner of that domain computer, and then you can change, I don't know, some web service certificate that, for example, allows you to put a UPN in the subject alternate name, and then you can simulate any user in the company using that certificate. It's so easy. Very dangerous. We fixed all the certificate templates. So after the recovery, the message is also you still have lots of work to do if the security posture of your ID is really, really bad. The other one, this is an interesting one. This surprised us. Again, knowledge, people trying to do their best. The intention of the people, I think the people were, we want to have have a help desk account to reset the passwords of all other users. Sounds logical, right? To me it sounds. But what did we see? We saw exactly what I said. What we also saw the other way around. Everyone within the company was allowed to reset the password of the help desk account, but the help desk account was still also able to reset the passwords of other accounts. In other words, everybody was able to reset each other's password. So all the admins, you're fired, because everybody was able to do it themselves. This was tricky. And then the EDR team showed us we are not fighting against, remember, the AD was still up and running. We are not fighting against one attacker. There appeared to be multiple. And then we needed to think, okay, is it even worth and possible to get this AD up and running in a secure manner and keep it like that? Imagine being in a boat with so many holes that you don't have enough fingers to put in the holes. In the end, it will sink, although you're trying to do your best. That's what I mean. So we made the decision, keep using it. We are going to continue with this one. This one will sink at some point, if it even sinks, but that's our assumption. It will go down. We continue with this guy. New operating systems, highest operating system available, force function levels, the main function levels, everything. The hardening. All the crap that we found, we removed it, everything. And it was really drastic. All the powerful groups, everything, empty it out. All the members just go out. Yeah, but no, goes out. Account operators, server operators, print operators, domain admins, enterprise admins. It was sometimes what I see, it's packed with people. I don't know why. We implemented, let's call it a very easy tiering model. Tier 0, Tier 1, Tier 2. Tier 2 for workstations, Tier 1 for servers, Tier 0 for domain controllers, ADFS, Azure AD Connect, and everything that behaves like a domain controller or is very powerful somehow. We changed OU permissions to hide those accounts and groups in AD. To give it a better explanation, I don't know how many of you know it. AD has a feature for hosting parties that's called list object mode. You start removing permissions from objects so that you only see those permissions, so those objects, if you actually have permissions. If it's not available, if you don't have the permission, you won't see it. Let's say it's comparable to the list object mode thing. We also, also important, go through your GPOs because you have no idea what's in there. Deploying software, starting scheduled tasks, etc., etc. Regarding the accounts, which is, by the way, not even mentioned here, it's mentioned in a later slide, we did the following. You might think, oh, let's reset the password of all existing admin accounts. No. Disable them, all of them. And then maybe even later on, delete them. what we did was create brand new admin accounts. Because if you use an account, it still has a profile somewhere. You have no idea what's in that profile. When we create the OU model, we create it at the top level in the domain. Not down in some OU, no, at the top level of the domain. Why? There's a simple reason. At the top level of the domain, only the default domain GPO and maybe other GPOs will affect those accounts. And then, if it's not enforced, on the OU, you can say block inheritance. And then all the GPO settings will not apply until you are safe and checked all the GPOs. They will not apply to those accounts. I've also seen it. If you have GPOs at domain level that are enforced, see if you can remove the enforcement so that those accounts are protected until further notice. Because if you have it down in some OU structure and you log on, and there's some GPO with some, I don't know, bad thing in it, and you're not aware of it, even if it's a new account, you will be impacted again. There are so many things you need to think about. And that's what I mean with complexity. So we kept using the AD while it was running, let it go. And there's one thing that's important to mention. I didn't mention it at the beginning. Right at the beginning here, as soon as we made the decision, let's make a backup and restore in parallel, because this AD was still up and running, and we are going to use it until we would switch it. One of the decisions we made was to stop forcing password changes temporarily. Because if you have, during these moments, people changing their passwords, you will have mismatches in the end, and then you have additional headaches, and it doesn't provide you much more risk by disabling it. So for users, we asked the customer, what is your password policy? 90 days. Make it 360. We will change it back afterwards after the whole recovery thing. Make it 360 so that people don't change their password because they have to. But also for computers. We told computers, highest level of the domain, stop changing passwords. Very important in this scenario because you have two streams of AD. 1.5 days, as I explained, tiering model, cleaning up privileges, new accounts, groups, and don't forget to use the protected users groups. All the tier 0 accounts should go into the protected users groups. Kerberos only, no delegation, highest encryption thingies, and many things. Use it. Yes, there may be applications that as soon as you add an account to the protected users, an application might not work. Think about it. It's a tier 0 account. Privileged account with SPNs. Well, it's an easy one because it was packed. Clean them. Don't even think about it. If it's a human account, at least an account for a human, either admin or normal, get rid of the SPN. Don't even ask the question if you should remove it or not. Get rid of it. It might be there because some application was installed under your account and the application put it in there, or somebody was doing a test and forgot it. But then when an account has this list of SPNs, it wasn't forgotten. Oh, and the OU admin SD holder permissions. Also think about the admin SD holder permissions because all those permissions on the admin SD holder will in the end be projected on all protected accounts and groups, and then if something bad is in here, your accounts are weakened. Again, the GPOs. We continued. And now the tough decision. We were ready to go live. It's always fun in a company because normally it never happens. Let's just shut down AD. And we did it. Has anyone ever done a domain rename? I did, just for fun. No, I'm not saying in production, but just for fun to see what happens. The most beautiful part about domain rename is at a certain point, you do prepare, and then there's a moment when you press the button, and then if you have, for example, a virtualized environment, you see all your domain controllers, and then they go up again, if you're lucky. If you're lucky. That's one of those moments, then you need a forced recovery, but then for domain rename is not supported anymore for many things. But again, in this scenario, we told the customer, well, we discussed it with the customer, this is the time where you're going to shut down your AD. And we did it. We shut down the AD. We put the other one back. This whole thing felt like this. Driving a car and still changing the wheels. Because dual streams of AD. See what's happening on one side, the compromised part, recovering the other part, and then securing it, and then at some point in time, as one of my colleagues told me, as if you rip out the heart of the company, throw it away, and put in a new one, and reboot it. And it worked. It works, I know. Tough decision. Taking it down, you just need to do it. You won't ever do it in a normal scenario, but in a recovery scenario, you might need to. Of course, when we moved from the isolated environment, it's not just, oh, click move. No, we need to change IP addresses, VLANs, DNS IP addresses, the whole thing. And then you have to move. After the whole move, 30 minutes later, everything was up and running again. So we fully automated the recovery by recovering DCs, repromotion of the DCs in the same process as needed, including all the AD service steps, metadata cleanup, increasing the RID pool, resetting Kerberos TGT, DC computer accounts, and the whole thing that exists out there that needs to be done. The EDR team, as I mentioned earlier, there were four attackers. They had taken down many, many IPs and many command and control systems, trying to attack against the AD. While we were doing our things, they were doing their things. It was a continuous team effort, communicating with each other, very important, by the way, to do when is this going to happen, when is that going to happen. Then they were telling us what they were seeing so that we could behave on it and clean. But because we put the AD back, all the servers and clients, and that's the magic bullet with the whole password reset thing, disabling it, all those servers and clients were up and running. Over 1,000 servers were rebooted. Because they had to create a new secure channel with the new AD. Because when they were up and running, they were basically talking to the compromised one. So we put the AD back, we shut down the old AD, the compromised AD, put the other one back, reboot all servers, all workstations, everything. Took a moment, and then everything was talking fine again to the AD. There's always a slight chance where there's some password mismatch because you might have missed it, I don't know. But then, after putting back the AD, we changed the password policy again from, what did I say, 360 to 90. And we enabled the password change thing again for the computers. In this previous customer, I still don't know, but they also still don't know, somebody had disabled changing of the passwords of the computers. It was at the highest level at the domain. And we found it by looking at the passwords, one of the reports. Why are those passwords so old? And then you start digging in, and you find, oh, there's a GPO telling the computers to disable password change. They survived. They are still alive. So after, there was a challenging week. After 17 hours a person, 70 hours a person, we achieved this. A week. This is, of course, not a global company. I need to be honest with you. This was a company with, if I'm not mistaken, 2 data centers. It's a scenario, because if it's a global company, distributed, multiple domains, multiple forests, whatever, okay, it looks different. This might not work in every single scenario. It is a scenario that worked. So you need to think about those scenarios, how to attack the attacker. So we performed a very fast recovery, fully functional and safe. No more owned privileged accounts because we disabled the old ones and we created new ones. We told the customer, please don't use the old ones because you have no idea how those are going to be misused in any other way. In this case, this customer did have password-through authentication. But because it was done so quick for them, and there were, yes, we went back in time, but just a little bit. It was of a running AD, backup, restore in parallel. So there was a mismatch, but important. I forgot a point previous in the whole synchronization. When you go back in time with your AD, one of the things that happens is objects that you deleted because people left the company or the objects are not needed anymore, when you go back in time, those objects are back again. But also the other way around. In your Azure tenant, the accounts, nothing happened. And then you have Azure AD Connect. While Azure AD Connect is performing a delta sync, you're okay. But as soon as it performs a full sync, it starts realizing, hey, I've got new objects, the ones that had to be deleted, but I'm also missing objects, the ones that were created after the backup. And when it starts doing a full sync, when it's going to do a full sync, because you told it to, or because you perform an upgrade of Azure AD Connect, and then Microsoft changed one of the synchronization rules, and when you change the synchronization rule, what's the trigger? Do a full sync. When it performs a full sync, all those changes it suddenly detects will go to Azure. Those accounts that are going to be created, you can say, okay, could be a security risk, but all those accounts that it doesn't see anymore, again, it's not deleted, it doesn't see the objects because those were created after the backup. Those will be seen as deletions, and those accounts will be deleted in Azure. You might think, oh, I can undo the deletion in Azure. Sure, you can, but from a user perspective, it's immediate user impact. Licenses lost, mailbox lost, accounts lost to services, lost to whatever. So what do you need to do? As soon as you think about, I'm going to do a forest recovery, the first thing you must do is disable every single synchronization mechanism with AD that synchronizes to or from. Disable it. Because you need to have a stable environment. You don't need to have all kinds of stuff banging against it with changes, because it will be a headache later. Disable it. And then after the recovery, perform a gap analysis. What does Azure AD know? What does AD know? And there will be a difference. So for those objects that exist, and this is just an example because it's more than that, those objects that exist in Azure but not on AD, just recreate the objects in AD with the exact same UPN and the exact same immutable ID. And as soon as Azure AD Connect starts to sync, it will see, oh, I need to delete this object. Oh, I now can use this object. And the whole sync and the connections from AD to Azure AD will remain in place, and the data will not be deleted. There's a catch. The immutable ID originally is sourced from the object GUID. You need to have an attribute that you can manipulate. So if you create a new account, you need to be able to put in the immutable ID that's in Azure onto that account. If you are using object GUID, which I think originates from one of the earliest Azure AD Connect versions where they were using object GUID, then you have a problem. If you have moved to, for example, by extending the scheme of AD, which of course is possible, and then using your own custom attribute to put in the data, and that's your location for immutable ID, you're good, because then you can put in your own data. If you are using MSDS consistency GUID, you're also good. But if you are still using, and I must say that even if you use a custom schema extension and MSDS, it still uses the source of the object GUID as the initial value. But the idea is you must be able to update the value with something else. Think about multiple domain forest. You need to move a user from domain A to domain B, but you don't want to lose the connection. Delete write down the the immutable ID, delete the user, create it in the other domain, put in the immutable ID back again, and the connection remains in place. If you are still on the object GUID, make sure to move away from that and start using the MSDS consistency GUID or your own custom schema change. Because in normal scenarios, nobody cares, everything is fine. In a disaster recovery scenario, it's those small things that matter, including the password hash sync, the whole thing. So in a disaster recovery scenario, that's the whole thing that matters. Be prepared and discuss whatever needs to be discussed with disaster recovery in mind. Takeaways. Well, open door, but please please, please, please invest in securing your AD. I know Azure is cool, it's nice, lots of nice features, but don't forget your AD. Use the tools, as we mentioned, Purple Knight, Bloodhound, anything else you might find, and use it to scan your AD, but also fix it. And keep monitoring for real time for all the bad stuff that's going on your network. Implement EDR, XDR solutions. But also be able to reactively restore your AD. When it goes down the drain, make sure to bring it back. These customers that we helped, for many years, I've written disaster recovery plans. You need to do this, you need to do that. And now we are helping customers that don't have a disaster recovery plan. You need to do something from the top of your head. Well, we can do that, and I can do that because it's throughout the experience. But if you don't, and if you want to do it yourself and you don't have the experience and no plan, it will be a tough time. Disaster recovery plan is more than technology. Many people focus on technology, like, oh, I bought a tool, I'm fine. No. It's about logistics. It's about the ability to have a isolated network. It's about the ability to still deploy systems because you need to restore AD onto it. Fresh systems, fully patched. Communications, logistics, if everything is going down the drain, how are you going to communicate? If your communication stream is, for example, Office 365, okay, but if authentication to Office 365 is down, what do you do? WhatsApp? Signal? I don't know. So, disaster recovery is just much more than the whole technology. And important to understand is, it's in the end not technology. It's about your business. Prioritize based on your business, the most important users, the most important applications, and then approach it like that. And also with regards to whole security stuff. At a customer, when we checked for the compromised passwords, we were checking and then telling people, hey, you need to change your password. And now you need to change the password. And the person changed the password. We checked again, it's still compromised because we have been telling people for years, your password must be 7 characters and it needs to be complex, and then you still get those shitty passwords because that's what people do. Nobody comes up with a machine-generated password. Nobody. At a previous customer, I think I made about 40,000 enemies. Why? Because I convinced management to implement a solution to check for compromised passwords and block them immediately. So not after the fact, but if somebody wanted to use a compromised password, it was not possible. It got an error, the same stupid error, doesn't fulfill all the complexity stuff. What happened? And we implemented it. It took some time. And then you have to explain to a user, because that's what we have been telling users for years, 7, 8 characters, 9 characters, I don't know. Your password might be this long and still be compromised. I don't know. So we told users that the best explanation we could give them, think about a sentence with maybe stupid errors that only you are able to remember. I know we must get rid of passwords, and we should. And but until that point in time, I think this is one of the best ways. And we implemented. So in the end, we got rid of all the compromised passwords, and I had 40,000 enemies. It's all in the end about acceptance, because people need to get used to it. It's also the change part that scares people. It always scares people. Seek help if needed, but before the attack. Of course, after the attack, you probably call somebody to help you, but preferably do it before. Automate as much as possible. It's more than just restoring a single or multiple domain controllers. There may be solutions out there that are able to back up domain controllers because they support it. But how about recovering multiple domain controllers? How about all those AD-related steps you need to take? The customer that I was working with this weekend, they had a backup solution. Guess what? It was integrated with AD. AD was attacked, backup solution was attacked, no backups, end of story. We were still able to help them. because somebody suddenly, we were almost saying, well, sorry, this is going to be, we need to rebuild everything from scratch, until somebody suddenly remembered, oh wait, we still have domain controllers in IS from Azure, and it looked like, out of coincidence, Azure Backup Services had created a backup of one of those domain controllers. Those were still encrypted, the domain controllers, but the backup was still usable, the only one. So look at your backup solution if it's integrated with AD. Integrated meaning that if you attack AD, you can get to the backup solution. It should not be possible. Our solution does not allow that. Many others, same story. But if it's so integrated with AD in terms of authentication or authorization, get rid of it. Because in the end, if somebody encrypts your AD, it will encrypt your backups. The fastest RTO is with a third-party tool. Test your plan, disaster recovery drills every year, preferably. And check for any security flaws it might have, because it's still possible to have a security flaw. Let's have a look if the AD is back or not. How much time? An hour. Great. Is it done or not? And why? No, it's still recovering. Well, then probably there's something wrong with the infrastructure, because this should have been done in 20 minutes because I tested it. Sorry. No. I don't know why, really, I don't. I'm not going to troubleshoot, but it should be possible to restore really, really quickly, because that's the whole goal. Questions?
Thank you very much for the deep insights into AD recovery. Are there any questions?
And if you have questions afterwards, contact details.
How to recover service accounts? What about service accounts? And the password of the service accounts?
Well, one of the things we see with passwords is those are very old, especially for companies that, let's say, started to use AD from the early days, let's say the year 2000 or so. You will find passwords that are very, very old. You must reset them, because think about it. The password that was chosen back then, it might be strong from that perspective, but today it's probably nothing. So my best answer to you, and it's I think the only answer, is reset the password of every single service account to something that is machine generated and put it in a password vault. That's the only way, and you need to do it. Is it a pain? Yes, is it a pain? It's a pain, because it's not just about resetting the password, you also need to change the application. If the account is misused in all kinds of applications and it's doing all kinds of things and it's configured all over the place, then it's going to be a pain in the behind to change that password.
Is there a question about GMSAs?
GMSAs, you need to monitor if those are actually being changed on a 30-day by 30-day basis. Because GMSAs, by default, that's the best of those GMSAs. If you have a regular service account running somewhere for some application, if the application supports a GMSA, move to it. Because the password is rotated every 30 days like a computer account. But I also know it can occur, for whatever stupid reason, the password is not rotated, and then you need to investigate what the issue is.
If you have to recover something before those 30 days, what do you do? Put it back at 6 somehow?
It's like GMSAs, it's like a computer account password. 30 days change, history of 1. So you have basically a window of 60. Chances that you really go further back than 60 days are... When doing a recovery, I'm going to give you a choice to think about. What will you do regarding choice? Would you choose a backup from today to restore that has the shittiest security ever? Or would you choose a backup from a week ago that has the best security? My choice would be the one from today with the shittiest security. Why? It has the most recent data in terms of objects, passwords, whatever. Regarding the security, I can do something about it, which is easier than going back in time, having a pain regarding all those missing objects, all those passwords that are mismatching, but the security is perfect. So regarding workload, that's so much more than fixing the security. I would always choose the most recent backup available, always.
Okay, thank you. One more question, and then due to time restrictions, we would begin with the next talk.
I got a question. You mentioned that all the servers and the clients don't have to rejoin the domain what you restored. Basically, how do you do that? Because if you set up a new domain, basically, then you have to rejoin all the clients and servers, right?
Are you talking about the scenario that I explained? Yeah. No, it was not a new domain. It was, let's call it a clone. Okay. It was a clone, sorry. All right. So we have an AD, we backed it up, we restored that, so call it a clone. So it was, if it was a brand new domain, you would be right. Okay. So because we cloned it, and because we were thinking, well, there could be a mismatch in passwords somehow, let's stop the password changing stuff. Afterwards, we will fix it, and we fixed it to prevent those headaches.
First, Jorge, thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you. Thank you.